Hey everybody, Lawrence here with Dirty Basement Terrain, coming at you with another one. Now, I've built houses and buildings before. I've built little farmhouses. I've built different upgraded farmhouses. And I've done all that different things. They've mainly been like one or two story houses. But this time I actually wanted to go a little bit bigger and go with a three-story house. I don't know why. I just figured, yeah, that'll be cool. But then I had some new toys that I wanted to try out and different things. So I was like, yeah, let's use some of the new stuff and just build a three-story house. I don't know why, but this is the house I actually built. Now, this house is also going to serve. This building is also going to serve another purpose. There's a gentleman up in Canada who is completely nuts, I think, for doing this. But Dungeon Minister, I love you, I really do. I think you're nuts for trying to run a convention, but I know so many that people appreciate you and really do enjoy your content, and all the attendees to your Clericon last year had fun, and I know people are going to love attending this year. So once again, I am going to be sending stuff out to Dungeon Minister that he can use as prizes, auction items, whatever he does with it, that's up to him. But if you guys want a chance at this house, you're going to have to go to Clericon 2024, October 25th through the 27th in Glen Williams, Ontario. It's old school D&D plus some other games and some fun, weird things like an onion eating contest, but it's going to be a blast. Even though I can't attend, I do want to send support again this year. So not all other items that have been built on this channel will go up there, but if you guys want a chance at this particular specific item, you're going to have to go to Clericon for it. So, but before we actually get to show you how I built this, I want to give a big shout out to my patrons, Dungeon Matron, Mia Geek, Karl, Sykes. Your guys' help is always appreciated. I've actually made an order recently using some of the patron funds. So once I get that, I'll show you what it is. But again, guys, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your monthly help. So, all right, guys, let's get to it. First thing I want to do is I want to make a template for this build because I'm going to be using several layers for the second and third floor, because this thing is like 7 inches long and I don't have a piece that thick. I like to do solid builds. I don't do hollow because I don't do playable interiors. So right now I'm just doing a piece. I'm marking out a 7 by 7 inch square piece for the actual template eventually. But also while I'm in this step, I want to make sure to mark off the second and third floor, because this template is going to represent floors 2 and 3. The first floor I'm marking off at 3 inches, and the second floor I'm going to mark off at 4 inches, because being that it's going to slope the roof peak, I need to make sure there's enough area for the floor. Now that I've got that all marked out, I actually want to start marking the curve for the slope for the roof, because again, this is going to be a template for the substructure, and I just want to make sure I get a curve that I'm actually relatively happy with. For this, I actually wanted to go with the curved sloped roof because it's different. And here I am using a fresh blade to actually cut out the first curve. I'll show you a trick of how to get the curves to match up. Use that cutoff piece and match it up to the other side and just trace a little line with the pencil. And this way you'll get a nice even slope on both sides. Pretty easy. And then again, cut it off. And I'm leaving a little flat spot in the top there, just for aesthetic reasons really, because I thought it would look not cool. Now, the second floor, it was a little too big. I use a miniature here, and it's like, no, that's just too much. So I'm going to mark off a 1/2 inch, and the second floor is only going to be 2.5 inches approximately. So I'm just marking off 2.5 inches, and then I'm going to cut it off quick and easy. When I'm using templates like this, I actually like to be able to pin it to the foam so it won't shift when I'm actually cutting. So I just drill a couple little holes in so I can use some thumbtacks or push pins like I do. And now it's just a matter of simply running it through the Proxon or whatever hot wire tool you have. Now, like I said, this is going to be roughly 6 inches. These pieces of foam that I'm using is, I think, 1.5 inches thick, so I'm going to have to cut several layers. But it doesn't matter the thickness, but as long as you cut enough layers to however long you want your house to work. And once you get them all cut like that, you just hot glue them together and you have your substructure ready to go. It doesn't have to be perfect because eventually everything's going to be covered up anyway, so there are a few gaps. It's no big deal. Now, I cut 2 square pieces to actually smaller than what the top half will be, just because of the look I wanted to go. I want the first floor to be smaller than the second and third floor, floor space wise. So I just cut 2 pieces. I think it winds up being like 2.5 inches tall, and now I'm just trimming them up so it actually is flat. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect because this is all going to be covered up, and then I'm going to hot glue it to the second and third floor, and boom, a majority of the substructure is done. Now here I'm making a small template for, I cannot remember what they are called, but the little bump outs on the roof or the third floor. Someone told me once before and I forget, but it's going to be made similar to the way that the first template was, just on a much smaller scale. Now I have the smaller piece pinned onto a piece of 2-inch thick foam and running it through the Proxon the same as I did with the first template. Of course, with this I have to do it 4 times, but that's how it is. Now these little bump out pieces I have to cut at an angle so the front of it will sit straight up and down. And I think I measured the angle at like 54 degrees, so that's what I have my wire set at. Now that I have them all cut out and ready to go, it's just a matter of tracing on the pattern where the roof is going to go and then hot gluing them in place. Do they sit perfectly? No. But again, this is all going to be covered up. Now I have these pre-cut thin pieces of foam, and I'm going to be texturing them with a cobblestone roller. This is a 3D print that I actually purchased off of Temu. It's a new toy for me. A lot. But I want to go with a cobblestone pattern, and as you can see, it works really well on thin foam. Now I actually want to trim a piece of this cobblestone foam that I made to length. I'm not worried about the height or the width, the height, because that can be trimmed at a later date or later time after the glue dries. But this is just a matter of trimming it so I have nice straight flat ends, and it'll go on relatively easy. Like I said, this is just a matter of trimming it to length. And to attach it, I'm actually going with PVA instead of hot glue for this, because as thin as the foam was, at the time I was doing this, I was a little bit worried about the hot glue melting through the foam, and I didn't want that, so I went with PVA, just brushed on a nice even amount, and then I'll slap it on. While I'm waiting on glue to dry from the previous step, I want to get to work on the door. Now, I like to use a backing of this graphic medium chipboard and use that miniature to get an idea of size. So I'm going with 2.5 tall by 2 inches wide. It seems to be appropriate for the miniature I was using, so And I'm just going to trim this graphics medium chipboard the size that I want. Now, also I have previously made thin pieces of foam that I cut down in roughly 3x3 by really thin. Don't ask, maybe an 1/8 inch thick. And I'm just going to texture it with a plastic grout brush. I like using the plastic. I like the texture I get with the plastic, and it doesn't make as much mess as like the metal brushes. Well, once I got that done, it's just a matter of slapping on some glue to the chipboard backing for the door, and then just attaching it to the non-textured side of the foam I made here, and then trimming it away, leaving a little excess, and then giving it some time to dry. Pretty simple. While I'm waiting on the glue to dry for the door, I'm actually going to take another piece of foam and then just squish it as thin as possible, because I want to make the metal banding for the door. So I have this smooth roller, and I said just make it as thin as possible, because the foam I used for the wood on the door is a little too thick for the metal banding at least for the visual I want to go for. So I'm just using whatever I can and squishing as thin as I can. It's pretty simple. And then once that's done, I'll cut a few small thin strips out for the banding, and then cut a little bit of an angle at one end. Then I'll grab the door and kind of match it up to how long I want it to be. Now that the glue is dry, I'm actually going to texture in the actual individual planks there with a pencil. Pretty quick, simple, and easy. Then I realized, oh, you know what? I forgot to trim off the excess I left on. So I'm going to do that quick. No problem. Now kind of measure up the banding to the door itself. Trim it off for both pieces, and I want to make sure it actually goes over each individual plank, because if it doesn't touch the plank, it's going to fall apart. And also the backing for the door handle, I'm using excess from one of the strips, and then easily put on some glue, and then put it in place for both bands and the door handle backer. Now, this step I honestly could have skipped, but I'm grabbing a piece of that pre-cut thin foam I have and just hot gluing a slab in place, because I want a smooth surface that I work on. But again, honestly, I could have skipped this step. And then it's just a matter of trimming it to be flush to the second floor. Now I want to put the door handle on. I just want to drill a small hole through the backing, and I'm using that small pre-prepared door handle that I have a bunch of ready to go. Add a little PVA and then stick it through, and the door is done. Now I want to get to work on the chimney. As you can see, I made a template for that as well, and I'm just want to carve. This is basically a substructure for me to build up on for the chimney itself. Well, add bricks, because it's going to be a lot of bricks. But it's just basically cut out the size for the building itself to give me something to build on. Now there's a small gap between the initial substructure for the chimney I built and the first floor of the building, so I just had to cut out a filler. Now I have a bunch of timbers that I made previously that will work great for this project, but I don't want to use a full-size one, so I just cut them in half. Now I hot glued the gap filler onto the substructure of the chimney, and now I'm just actually gluing the whole substructure for the chimney onto the building itself. Quick, easy, done. Now I want to actually start adding bricks to this chimney. For the first row, I'm actually going to go with hot glue because that'll give it a good, the rest of them a solid base to build off of. It'll dry quick and it'll be like good and solid. This is actually a really good idea. An idea I actually got from Leaf over at Devs and Dice. Do the first row or two if you're building up on hot glue, and then you can switch over to PVA. And that'll give you more time to work as far as placing the bricks. So I've been doing that ever since I heard that. But again, this is just running a line of bricks along the bottom and for hot glue, and then afterwards I think I switch over to PVA. Are there texture rollers that I could have used that have a brick pattern that I could have cheated, or just gone ahead and gotten this done real quick and easy? Oh yeah. But I personally prefer the look of individual bricks. I just think it gives you something that you just can't get with the texture rollers. Now don't get me wrong, I love texture rollers. I've used it on this project already for the cobblestone, but for bricks, I just prefer individual bricks. Now, granted, yeah, it can be mind-numbingly boring to place individual bricks in any quantity, but it works out and it looks good. Of course, now that I've gotten most of my bricks laid, or a good chunk of them, I wasn't going to make you watch that. It was mind-numbing to place them. I can't imagine watching it. I got to the roof, and I actually want to cut out a small section as wide as the bricks are and just kind of chunk it out just so it looks, this part up at the roof, visually it just looks better if I do this and place bricks between the chimney substructure and the roof itself. Now granted, I'm not placing each individual bricks. I'm using some of the timber spacers, which are cut to the same size as spacers in between, but again, this will just, to me, it just looks better. Now that I've got that cut out, it's just basically put some glue in there and then just jam it in place. It's a simple process. It's not that hard. Of course, granted, I did not show you me cutting these bricks up because I have tubs and tubs of them pre-cut. It's cutting bricks, is about as much fun as placing them, honestly. It's a great way to use scrap and off-cut foam, which is exactly what I turn on a lot of my scrap foam into. I turn it into bricks, and then I have a big supply of them that I don't have to cut them up each time I use them, or need to use them. If you got extra time or something like that, and you have scrap foam, cut it up into shingles, into bricks, into timber pieces, stuff you're going to use on your builds. That way you'll have it on hand, and then you won't have to do it when you're building something and go, oh man, I got to cut bricks up before I can do this. No, you already have it done. And it winds up working out real well. Now I'm actually using all that timber framing that I cut in half, and I'm going to start gluing it into place. And this is a pretty simple process. It's just a matter of actually putting it on, kind of dry fitting it, seeing how it goes, adding some PVA, and then putting it in place. Now, I'm using these pins to hold it in place because I am using PVA, and some of these I'm actually going to be bending and curving, which would cause it to actually move out of place, and I don't want that, so the pins will hold it in place till it dries. I could use hot glue in this, but I also don't want to put too much, or I'm trying to avoid melting. At least for this step I am. At least that's what I was telling myself. And honestly, if you do have a pinhole, it's going to be so small, it's not going to be noticeable. I've actually looked pretty hard, and these pins are so thin, it's hard to see where the holes are. And if you actually place it just right, you'll never notice it after it's all painted and everything. This entire building with all the timber framing I've done, I think I found one hole that is actually noticeable, and I had to look really hard to find it. But again, this is just a matter of placing the timbers wherever you want it, and so it looks good and looks like it, kind of decorative pattern, and some bending it. See, that's the great thing about foam, is it bends. If it's thin enough, it will bend, and very easily. Of course, again, you'll have to pin it in place if you're using PVA, but it'll still bend and take curves and very easily. Now I have to make some frames for all these windows that I popped out of Dollar Tree doll houses. Again, I'm using that pre-prepared thin cut foam that I had a while ago, and I just trace out the actual window in this small piece of foam, cut out the window itself from the trace pattern, and then pop it out. Now I want to actually cut thinner spaces around the window. Kind of funny, and being that these are curved windows, this is easier, and boom, I have it. Now all I have to do is add some texture, grab my expensive sculpting tool, my number 2 pencil, and then just carve in some wood grain lines, and I have my window frame. Now I already glued all the windows to where they're going to go, and I just need to add the frame, so I'm putting around a small batch of PVA around the edge. Grab the frame real quick, place it in, boom, done. Pretty quick, pretty simple. Now the fun part. Another fun part, shingles. Now for this, I'm actually, even though these shingles were all pre-made because of previous buildings, I actually cut them out and had them all ready to go in supply. So again, this is a matter of making extras when you do a build so you don't have to do it again later. I'm going to hot glue these all on in alternating rows. And see, I'm not super worried about the foam melting even though it's really thin because I'm laying it on top of one another. And I actually have the glue gun set on low temp, so we're good there. But again, it's just a matter of laying row after row and then cutting around, cutting angles, cutting it so it fits around the little bump outs there or any other way or place that you have to go. It can be a little frustrating and monotonous at times trying to cut the angles right so that it fits flush to the roof, but once you get the hang of it, it's not so bad. It runs pretty easy. Now I have some that are actually cut, shingles that are cut from both ends, or both from the top and the bottom, so when it comes to the flat parts, like on the top of the roof there or the top of the bump outs, I can just lay one on top and then I'll have like a small rounded shingle thing, a bob. It looks pretty, so I'm going with that. And here I just got to add the last little bit of timber framing around the bump outs there. I actually changed my mind, actually went with the hot glue since I had it set on low temp anyway, so it's just a matter of quickly getting it on, trimming it to shape, and then done. I mean, it's really not that hard. Now the second and third floor, I want to go with a stucco pattern, so I'm in between all the timber framing, so I'm using a homemade texture paste and just brushing it on, really. I mean, it goes on pretty easy, and it'll give me that nice stucco pattern that I want, rather than gluing, just straight up gluing sand on. This is just a mixture of PVA, sand, and wall spackle, or wall filler, depending on where you're at. And yeah, it's brown. I did add some brown paint to just give it some color. Now that I actually got the construction part done, it's time to actually Mod Podge this thing. For this, I'm using some black Mod Podge. I like using the Mod Podge will give it a little bit of extra protection. especially those shingles, because they are so thin, and they need it. Also, giving it the black base coat. Once I start actual painting, it'll give it a darker tone to the paint job. Actually, if you want to go for a brighter paint job, you can use a white Mod Podge for this step. Now that I've got everything Mod Podge and primered, actually primered all the windows with airbrush, time to start adding some color. For all the wood, I'm basically going with a dark brown, burnt umber actually. I want to get a good, as much close to 100% as I can on all the wood areas. Just, like I said, this is just a good base coat. I base coated the stone in a dark gray, and now I'm actually starting an overbrush of a mid-tone. I think it's nutmeg brown for this. Like I said, this is like 75-85% coverage. It's just leaving all the deepest recesses alone, like all the texturing, all the little spaces in between each shingle. You want to leave the deepest recesses alone in this step. Now, this is something I do with all my builds. I like to add a little bit of different visual interest to all the stonework, the cobblestones, the brickwork, just so it's not a big gray blob. What I'll do is paint individual stones and bricks different colors. I'm only showing you one, but I actually do like 4 or 5 different colors. As you can see, it looks like a clown puked on it. But with a quick overbrush of a mid-tone gray, it'll start dulling down the different colors, and it won't be quite as bright, and it won't look like a clown puked. Again, with this overbrush, it's like this for the stones. I'm probably getting closer to like a 75% coverage, leaving all the cracks and recesses alone. Just trying to make sure I get a nice, good coverage over, or a nice semi-even coverage over everything. Now for here, I'm actually dry brushing a light gray over all the stonework areas. Again, this will also tone down those other colors even more, and it'll look more natural stone-like. And the different colors will just make it look more interesting. Most of it's gray, but like I said, spots of color make it pop just a tiny little bit more. But if you don't do it, it's a big gray block. So I personally don't like doing that, so this is why I do it. It just visual interest will be like, hey, that looks good, or it's like, wow, that looks really good. Now here I'm using a tan or light brown. Light mocha is the actual color. Just to do a quick dry brush over all the woodwork, the shingles, all the timber framing I did. Basically anything that needs, well, a quick dry brush. That's wood. This is just basically going, you just want to go really light, just to catch all the edges and highlight all the textures and, like I said, edges of all the different wood areas. And here I want to start painting all the stucco areas. I think I'm using a territorial beige to start off with. Trying to go for, the same as the other two areas, go for 100% coverage with this. This is just a base coat. And get as much coverage as I can without actually hitting all the other paintwork that I just did. And here I'm doing, I hate to use this term, but a heavy dry brush with an ivory color, just basically hitting all the edge, bringing up all the edges and textures of the stucco area. I'm only doing 2 different colors on the stucco because I found out through trial and error in previous builds that I only need 2 colors. So this is what I'm going with. Now I'm going to be painting all the actual window bits and anything that needs metal. All the windows that have like a rounded top, I'm painting copper, or anything, and the windows up top on the 3rd floor. The circular part I'm painting copper, and then the back, the frame will actually get like a gunmetal gray, which is like a nasty silver metallic. And the windows that have like that rectangular top is also going to get the gunmetal gray for the window itself. Also, during this step, I'm going to paint the metallic supports for the door copper color, as well as the door handle backing and the handle itself. Now for this step, I'm actually just giving everything, it's just a wash. Everything I'm going to give it a good old nasty dark brown homemade wash. It's a pretty simple step, just slap it on everything. No neatness about it, just trying to keep like massive amounts of wash gathering up. Too much from any one spot, but this will give it like a little bit of a dingier, dirty look. And this will also help tone down all those bright colors from on the stonework. Also, interesting enough, when you're doing a lot of different work, I personally will put on different YouTube videos and something to listen to, because you're not going to hear any of the noises of what I'm building because I do this voiceover work. And interestingly enough, I was actually watching Karl over at Karl's Make Stuff do an interview with Red Dog Training, which is an awesome channel that y'all should check out. I'll put a link in the description, but I'll also put a link into the interview live stream itself. But replay, you can catch it on the replay. It's actually was really interesting to watch. Now that the wash is all dry, I'm going to go and give a quick light dry brush to everything, just to make the edge, all the textures and stuff pop again. While the wash did tone everything down, it did its job and give me a grungier look if I had not done it. So I'm just do a quick dry brush over all the wood right now and make everything pop just a little bit more. And the same was with the wood, all the stucco work. I'm going with the ivory again, at least I think it's ivory, and then doing a quick dry brush just to make it pop a little bit more. And it just bring up all that lovely texture from the texture paste, and just it looks good. So that's what I'm doing. And the same as with the wood and the stucco, I'm doing a quick light dry brush of the final highlight color on all the stone, just to make all the edges pop. And for the stone, I'm actually making sure I start from the top and work my way down, not in multiple directions, just in one direction for this. And that's also something that I tried to do with everything else, as it'll make it look like it's catching light from an above light source like the sun or whatever. But at least I'm trying to do what I had. Now I want to add some patina to all the copper pieces, or copper painted areas. This is Citadel's oxide. Don't ask me to pronounce that. But it's just a matter of painting on the technical paint and then just wiping off or removing the excess. Go into the corners and just make it look like, it's old copper. That's old copper or brass that's gotten a patina to it. It's a quick, easy way to do this, and it winds up looking really good. At least I think so. Now I'm going to use some dark brown pigment powder, homemade, and just kind of brush in like corners and stuff, and add some shadows and dirt or anywhere it might, dirt may have collected. Just give it a little bit of extra pop. I like using the pigment powder because, again, this is something you can skip, but I like using it because it's cheap to make and it just gives your build a little bit of extra pop. Once you're done placing it and all that where you want, you just hit it with a quick mist of some isopropyl alcohol and it'll set it in place. If you don't do this, eventually it'll rub off. So I don't know how your Cheeto dust wearing players are, but And of course now something I always love to do, add some moss paste. I'm gonna go relatively light, at least for me, with the moss paste, and just add in small corners and different places where moss might grow. And again, just to break up all that gray and brown, the green, it's not really noticeable, but if it wasn't there, it would just not pop as much, I guess. I know I say pop a lot, but whatever. But I just enjoyed it. I like adding moss to my stuff. So now that I got all the moss in place, I'm going to sprinkle on some yellow fine turf just to give it, the moss itself, a little extra highlight and make it pop even more than what it already does. This is a step you want to do while before the moss paste is dried, so it'll set. I typically don't do this, but for this I wanted to, so I'm adding some UV resin into all the front window frames. Had I thought ahead, I would have done this prior to placing all the windows, and it would have saved me a lot of bit of headache, which you're about to see. But this is really quick and easy. It's just, I'm using a toothpick to put the actual resin in place because the bottle itself is just massive and it would just spill all over the place as delicately as I'm trying to place it. So it's just a matter of putting the resin in place and then getting your UV light and then hardening it up. Now here's where I realized I ran into a problem. I forgot UV resin causes heat and it kind of messed up the foam and paint in the back. So I want it to be black, so I'm going to have to fix that. So I'm painting all the glass areas black. I'm using a contrast paint, which will, because it's a flat matte paint when it dries, because I don't have any gloss black paint. So this is what I'm doing. I just basically paint all the glass with this contrast paint. And then once it dries, to give it back that shine, I'm using some Mod Podge gloss. And the end result is I got some shiny black glass. So, yeah, it's a headache I could have avoided had I done the windows, fill the windows up with the resin prior to placing them, but mistakes. They happen. I'm really happy with how this turned out. Yeah, I made a few mistakes, especially like with the windows, but That's the thing about our hobby. We can make mistakes and we can fix them. So if you make a mistake, it's easily fixed, or you can actually enhance it into the build itself. But again, this was a fun build. It took me a little bit of time because of real life getting in the way, but again, I am really happy with how this turned out. I really, really am. So, I mean, I hope you guys like it as well as I do. I mean, it just really hits the spot where I was hoping it would look. Hey everybody, if you made it this far, it means you watched it in, and as always, I appreciate it, I really do. If you liked the video, hit thumbs up, click subscribe, hit the bell notification, you know, all the wonderful YouTube stuff. If you want to actually get a chance at the house that was on the build today, you're going to have to go to Clericon 2024, October 25th through the 27th up in Glen Williams, Ontario. Link in the description. If you can make it, go. It'll be a great time, especially if you're a fan of old school D&D. Yeah, absolutely go. As always, guys, you know, when you're making houses or anything, when you're making your terrain, there's only one person you got to worry about, and that's you, because it's your terrain.